Final warning. God says, a big shock is coming to your family. I am trying to protect you, but you must listen carefully. Don't skip this. Open immediately before it's too late. These are not casual words. They are not ordinary phrases you scroll past and forget. This is a divine interruption. This is heaven stepping into your timeline because something is forming behind the scenes, something that could shake the very foundation of your home. And God, in His mercy, refuses to let you walk blindly into it. When the Lord says final warning, it means the window of ignorance is closing. It means He has whispered before, nudged before, stirred your heart before. But now the tone has shifted. Now it is urgent. Now it is direct. A big shock is coming to your family. Notice that He does not say this to frighten you. He says it to prepare you. A shock is something sudden. It disrupts normalcy. It exposes what was hidden. It reveals cracks that were covered with temporary peace. It can come as unexpected news, a sudden conflict, a truth uncovered, a financial shift, a health scare, or a betrayal that no one saw coming. But here is what you must understand. God never warns without purpose. If destruction was the goal, there would be silence. But because protection is the goal, there is a warning. The very fact that you are hearing this message is evidence that heaven is fighting for your household. You may be wondering, why my family? Why now? Why me? The answer is not about punishment. It is about positioning. Families are under unusual pressure in this season. Stress, distractions, hidden resentment, unspoken struggles, these things have been quietly building. Sometimes the enemy waits for just the right moment when everyone feels comfortable, when vigilance has lowered, when prayer has become routine instead of intentional. That is when a shock hits hardest. But God, in His love, interrupts the pattern. He sends a message before the impact. He sends clarity before chaos. He sends a voice before the shaking begins. I am trying to protect you. You're the heart behind those words. This is not an angry God looking for failure. This is a father trying to shield his children. Protection does not always mean preventing every storm. Sometimes protection means warning you early enough so that the storm does not destroy what it was sent to test. There is a difference between being surprised and being prepared. The shock may still attempt to come, but if you are alert, prayerful, and spiritually positioned, what was meant to break you can instead strengthen you. What was meant to scatter your family can instead wake everyone up. But then comes the most urgent part. You must listen carefully. Don't skip this. Open immediately before it's too late. These words carry weight. Many people miss their moment because they delay. They think there will always be more time. They assume the feeling of urgency will return later. But some warnings are time-sensitive. Some instructions lose their power if ignored. The phrase "before it's too late" does not mean hopelessness. It means there is still time, right now. There is still an opening in the Spirit. There is still space to adjust, to pray, to correct, to guard your words, to watch your reactions, to pay attention to what feels off in your household. Ask yourself honestly, have there been subtle signs? Small tensions that seem minor. Conversations that felt heavier than usual. A strange sense of unease you brush aside. God often begins with whispers. But if whispers are ignored, the message becomes louder. Not because He wants to scare you, but because He refuses to let you drift into something preventable. This message found you for a reason. Out of millions of voices, this one reached your ears. That is not coincidence. That is alignment. The seriousness of this warning does not mean panic. It means awareness. Panic clouds the judgment. Awareness sharpens it. You are not being called to fear, you are being called to focus. Something is approaching that requires spiritual alertness. You may be the very person in your family chosen to sense it first. Not everyone hears the alarm at the same time. Not everyone discerns the shift in atmosphere. Well, someone must. And perhaps that someone is you. This is why you cannot treat this casually. This is why you cannot scroll past and say, "It's probably nothing." The title itself carries instruction, final warning. God says, "A big shock is coming to your family. I am trying to protect you, but you must listen carefully. Don't skip this. Open immediately before it's too late." Every sentence builds urgency. Every phrase carries intention. Heaven is not vague when timing is critical. Right now, you stand at a crossroads between awareness and assumption, between preparation and delay. The shock does not have to destroy your family, but ignoring this warning could make the impact heavier than it needs to be. Protection is being offered. Insight is being given. But you must respond. This is the moment where small actions can prevent major consequences. Something is forming. Something is shifting. But because God loves your family, He chose to speak before it happens. And that alone should tell you, this is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of divine intervention. There is a pattern woven all throughout history, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. God warns before He allows. He speaks before He moves. He sends a signal before the shift. And when He says, "A big shock is coming to your family," it is not because He enjoys destruction. It is because He refuses to let you be uninformed. A loving Father does not watch danger approach in silence. He calls out. He alerts. He prepares. That is what this moment is. Many people misunderstand warnings. They think a warning means something bad is guaranteed. But that is not how heaven operates. The warning is an invitation to partnership. It is God saying, "I see what is forming. Will you work with me to intercept it?" When the Lord reveals that something shocking is approaching your household, He is not sealing your fate. He is opening a door for you to step into spiritual authority. The shock may be forming, but so is your ability to respond correctly. Throughout time, major turning points were preceded by clear signals. There were whispers in dreams. There were nudges in the spirit. There were moments when something felt different, heavier, urgent. But the ones who paid attention were the ones who walked through the storm differently. The difference was not the absence of challenge. The difference was preparation, and preparation changes outcomes. You may already sense that something has been building in your family. Perhaps conversations have felt strained. Perhaps finances have been unusually tight. Perhaps someone close to you has been acting out of character. These are not random fragments. They can be early tremors before a larger shaking. And God, in His mercy, does not want you to dismiss them as coincidence. He wants you to see the pattern. The truth is, families are under spiritual pressure in this season. Unity is being tested. Loyalty is being tested. Communication is being tested. Small misunderstandings are turning into deep divides because no one stops to address the root. And when roots are ignored, fruit becomes bitter. The enemy thrives in silence and assumption. But God thrives in revelation and clarity. That is why this message is direct. That is why it feels urgent. It is heaven refusing to let confusion win. Here is something powerful. Warnings are proof of value. God does not issue final warnings over what he plans to abandon. He warns what he intends to preserve. If your family was insignificant in the bigger picture, there would be no interruption. There would be no alert. But the fact that you are hearing this means your household carries purpose. It means your unity matters. It means what happens next has weight beyond what you can currently see. However, a warning only helps if it is received. Many people hear alerts and delay action. They tell themselves they will pray later. They assume tensions will fix themselves. They convince themselves that everything will calm down naturally. But sometimes heaven is saying, do not wait. Act now. The phrase open immediately before it's too late is not dramatic language. It is timing language. It means there is still room to shift the atmosphere, but that room is not permanent. You are being positioned as a watchman for your household. Not to accuse, not to control, but to discern. Discernment is quiet but powerful. It notices what others overlook. It catches patterns early. It senses emotional undercurrents before they explode into visible conflict. And right now, discernment is your greatest weapon. This is also why engagement matters in moments like this. When you respond to a word, you strengthen it. When you agree with truth, you activate it. So if this message is speaking directly into your situation, do not stay silent. Like this video as a sign that you receive the warning with wisdom, not fear. Share it with someone in your circle who needs to hear this before events unfold. Comment below and declare, my family will be protected. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel so you never miss a divine alert meant to guard your household. These are not just online actions. They are acts of alignment. They help spread this urgent word to families who are on the edge of a moment they do not yet see coming. Understand this clearly. God's warnings are acts of mercy. Mercy does not always feel gentle. Sometimes it feels urgent. Sometimes it feels intense. But intensity does not equal punishment. It equals importance. The coming shock does not have to define your family's future. It can become a turning point instead of a breaking point. It can become the moment where hidden cracks are repaired instead of ignored. Right now, you are standing in a gap between what is forming and what could happen. That gap is where prayer works. That gap is where conversations can begin. That gap is where humility can soften pride and where forgiveness can heal tension before it hardens into division. But the gap will not stay open forever. God warns before he allows. And today, he has chosen to warn you. Before a major shock hits, there are almost always signs. Quiet signs. Subtle signs. Things that seem small on the surface but carry weight in the spirit. When God says a big shock is coming to your family, he is also revealing that clues have already been present. The question is not whether there were signs. The question is whether they were recognized. Think carefully. Has there been a strange tension in your home lately? Not loud arguments, but a quiet distance. Conversations that used to flow easily now feel forced. Eye contact is shorter. Patience is thinner. Words are sharper. Sometimes a coming shock announces itself through emotional shifts long before it appears in visible form. A home that once felt warm suddenly feels heavy. Laughter becomes rare. Silence becomes common. And everyone assumes it is just stress, just a phase, just life. But what if it is more? Perhaps there have been unusual dreams. Dreams that left you unsettled when you woke up. Dreams of separation, loss, confusion, or sudden change. Many dismiss dreams as random thoughts. But throughout history, warnings have often come in the quiet hours of the night when distractions are removed. If you have been waking up with a sense of urgency, that is not something to brush aside. It may be part of the alert system heaven uses to get your attention. Look at the financial atmosphere in your family. Have there been unexpected expenses, sudden financial strain, disagreements about money that seem disproportionate to the actual issue? Financial pressure can be one of the first cracks before a larger shaking. It creates stress, and stress exposes weaknesses in communication and trust. A shock sometimes builds through pressure points that were already fragile. What about health? Has someone in your family been unusually tired, emotionally drained, or irritable without clear reason? Sometimes the coming shock is not only external, it is internal. It can be burnout that was ignored. It can be emotional wounds that were never healed. It can be silent battles no one talks about. When these remain hidden, they grow. And when they reach a breaking point, the result feels sudden, even though it was forming slowly. Another sign is repeated patterns. The same argument happening over and over. The same misunderstanding returning in different forms. The same mistake repeated despite promises to change. Repetition is a signal. It is life trying to show you something unresolved. If the same issue keeps resurfacing, it is not coincidence. It is a warning light blinking consistently, waiting for someone to finally pay attention. There may also be a spiritual heaviness in your home, a lack of peace that you cannot logically explain, an atmosphere that feels unsettled. You walk into a room and sense tension, even if no one is speaking. This kind of heaviness is often ignored because it is not visible, but it is real. And when God says a shock is coming, He may be alerting you to address the spiritual climate before it turns into visible chaos. Sometimes the sign is sudden secrecy, a family member becoming guarded, devices being hidden, conversations being avoided, defensive reactions when simple questions are asked. These behaviors do not automatically mean disaster, but they do mean something is shifting beneath the surface. And when shifts go unaddressed, they can erupt into moments that feel explosive. The danger is not the presence of signs. The danger is normalization. When unusual becomes normal, awareness disappears. You tell yourself, this is just how things are. But deep inside, you know something feels off. That quiet inner discomfort is not random. It is discernment. And discernment is a gift meant to protect, not to be silenced. This is why this message is urgent. Not to create fear, but to sharpen your perception. The shock may not be unavoidable. It may be preventable if these signs are addressed now. Conversations can be initiated. Apologies can be spoken. Boundaries can be set. Prayers can become intentional instead of routine. But recognition must come first. You may be the only one in your family who senses this. Others may dismiss your concern. They may say you are overthinking. But sometimes the watchman sees what others cannot yet see. And being the watchman is not about panic. It is about preparedness. It is about caring enough to act before damage becomes deep. Hold on. What is about to be revealed next will expose the deeper layer behind these signs, and you will begin to understand why this warning could change everything. Type "My house will stand" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 314 is now activated. As we uncover these hidden signs, understand this. Every warning spoken here is a seed of light being sown into homes across the world. When you choose to support this mission through super thanks, membership, or a PayPal donation through the link in the description or the QR code on your screen, you are not giving to a channel, you are sowing into souls. Scripture declares that when you sow generously, you reap a harvest of righteousness. and today that harvest looks like families restored and disasters prevented. I feel led to say this plainly. I am inviting you to become a living vessel that carries this warning to someone who would never hear it otherwise. Do not miss the holy moment to act. Your seed becomes oil in the lamp of another household. As you give, may open heavens respond over your own family. Step into this prophetic act of obedience now. Now we must go deeper. When God says, a big shock is coming to your family, the natural reaction is fear. The mind immediately imagines the worst. But pause for a moment. A shock is not always destruction. A shock is sudden exposure. It is a disruption of what felt stable. It is an interruption of routine. And sometimes, it is the only way to prevent a slow collapse that no one was aggressing. There are different kinds of shocks. Some come as unexpected news, the phone call that changes the emotional atmosphere of the entire household. Some come as exposure, a hidden truth suddenly brought into the light. Some arrive as conflict, an argument that escalates beyond what anyone anticipated. Others manifest as financial shifts, job changes, relocations, or sudden decisions that affect everyone. The form may differ, but the common thread is this: it feels sudden, intense, and destabilizing. But here is the revelation you must understand. A shock is not always sent to destroy. Sometimes it is allowed to correct. When a structure has small cracks forming beneath the surface, gentle reminders may not be enough. People ignore whispers. They overlook subtle warnings. They assume tomorrow will fix what they refuse to confront today. So eventually, something shakes the structure hard enough to make everyone stop and look. If there has been pride in the family, a shock can humble. If there has been secrecy, a shock can expose. If there has been emotional neglect, a shock can awaken. It may feel painful in the moment, but pain is often the signal that something needs attention. The worst outcome is not the shock itself. The worst outcome is refusing to learn from it. Sometimes God allows shaking because stability was an illusion. Everyone thought things were fine. Smiles were maintained. Schedules were kept. Responsibilities were met. But beneath the surface, resentment was building. Silence was growing. Disconnection was widening. And without intervention, the eventual collapse would have been far worse. A shock interrupts that path. You must also understand the difference between destruction and correction. Destruction leaves nothing standing. Correction reshapes what is weak and reinforces what is strong. When God warns you ahead of time, it signals that correction is still possible. There is still time to strengthen weak points. There is still time to confront uncomfortable truths gently instead of explosively. There is still time to pray strategically rather than react emotionally. Imagine a storm approaching a house. If the occupants are unaware, windows are left open, doors are unlocked, and loose objects remain outside. When the storm hits, damage multiplies. But if they are warned in advance, they secure the windows, lock the doors, bring fragile items inside, and prepare supplies. The storm may still come, but its impact is significantly reduced. This is what this warning is offering you: preparation. The cunning shock may reveal something that was hidden for years. It may bring to light a behavior, a habit, or a secret that has been quietly shaping your family dynamic. It may expose financial mismanagement, emotional infidelity, spiritual drift, or unresolved trauma. And exposure, though uncomfortable, is not your enemy. Hidden infection is more dangerous than open wounds. Once something is visible, it can be healed. There is also another layer. Sometimes the shock is not about wrongdoing, but about redirection. A sudden job loss may force a family into a new opportunity they never would have pursued voluntarily. A sudden relocation may remove toxic influences that were quietly damaging unity. A sudden confrontation may clear years of misunderstanding. In these cases, what feels like chaos is actually alignment. However, the outcome depends on response. If panic takes control, the shock multiplies. Words spoken in fear create deeper wounds. Accusations spoken in anger create lasting division. But if calm discernment leads, the same shock becomes a catalyst for growth. This is why preparation now matters. Emotional maturity now matters. Prayer now matters. Humility now matters. The enemy thrives on suddenness. He counts on surprise to amplify damage. But when God reveals that something is coming, surprise loses its power. You are no longer blind. You are no longer unprepared. Awareness shifts the atmosphere. Awareness strengthens your spirit. And listen carefully. Not every family will experience the shock in the same way. For some, it will be external. For others, deeply internal. But the common purpose remains: to awaken, to expose, to redirect, or to strengthen. If you respond wisely, this moment can become a testimony instead of a tragedy. The shaking does not mean abandonment. It means attention. It means something important enough to correct is at stake. And when something is important, heaven intervenes. The nature of the coming shock is not random chaos. It is a pivotal moment, a crossroads, a divine interruption meant to stop what could have quietly destroyed your family over time. And because you have been warned, you have an advantage. You can prepare your heart. You can guard your words. You can approach sensitive areas with wisdom instead of denial. This shock does not have to scatter your household. It can unify it. It can refine it. It can expose weakness so that strength can finally be built in its place. The shaking may feel intense, but intensity does not equal finality. What comes next will reveal why you, specifically, were chosen to hear this warning first. There is a reason this message reached you, and not someone else in your family. There is a reason you felt compelled to open it instead of scrolling past. When God says a big shock is coming to your family, and then places this warning directly in your path, it is not random selection. It is divine positioning. Out of everyone connected to your household, you were chosen to hear this first. It is not coincidence. It is calling. Every family has at least one watchman. One person who senses shifts before they become visible. One person who feels the tension when everyone else pretends things are fine. One person who lies awake at night thinking, praying, wondering, discerning. That person carries a quiet burden, not of fear, but of awareness. And if you are listening to this right now with a stirring in your spirit, there is a strong possibility that you are that person. Being chosen as the watchman is not glamorous. It does not come with applause. Often, it comes with misunderstanding. Others may dismiss your concerns. They may say you are overthinking. They may accuse you of being too sensitive. But discernment often feels lonely before it is proven right. The watchman sees the smoke before anyone else smells the fire. God does not choose the loudest voice. He chooses the most attentive heart. He chooses the one who will not ignore the nudge. He chooses the one who will respond instead of delay. When he says, "I am trying to protect you," he is also saying, "I am trying to work through you." Protection flows through willing vessels. And you may be the vessel assigned to your household in this season. Understand this clearly. This is not about control. It is not about confrontation fueled by suspicion. It is about spiritual responsibility. There is a difference. Responsibility means you pray before you react. It means you observe before you accuse. It means you seek wisdom before you speak. The shock that is forming may be reduced, or even redirected, if the watchman stands alert. You might be asking yourself, why me? Why can't someone else carry this weight? The answer is simple but powerful, because you are capable. God does not assign responsibility where there is no capacity. If you are sensing this warning deeply, it is because you have the strength to handle it. You have the emotional depth to navigate sensitive conversations. You have the spiritual awareness to intercede when others are distracted. You have the maturity to stay calm when emotions rise. Sometimes the shock that is coming is connected to someone who is struggling silently. A family member may be battling something privately: addiction, fear, insecurity, financial pressure, emotional pain. They may not know how to ask for help. They may not even recognize the depth of their own struggle. And when the breaking point comes, it feels sudden to everyone else. But the watchman often sensed it long before. You are not being chosen to carry anxiety. You are being chosen to carry influence. Influence begins in prayer. It continues in tone. It shows up in how you respond when tension rises. If you react with panic, others will panic. If you react with calm strength, others will stabilize. Your energy will set the emotional temperature of your home in the coming days. There is also something deeper here. The enemy often targets families that carry purpose. Unity is powerful. A united household creates stability, vision, and generational strength. So division becomes a strategic attack. If one key person collapses emotionally, the ripple effect spreads quickly. But if one key person stands firm, the ripple effect spreads strength instead. You may be that anchor. This is why denial is dangerous. It is easier to pretend nothing is wrong. It is easier to hope the tension disappears on its own. But the watchman cannot afford denial. The watchman must acknowledge the signs and move intentionally. That may mean initiating a difficult conversation. It may mean spending extra time in focused prayer. It may mean checking in gently with someone who hath been distant. It may mean setting boundaries that should have been set long ago. You are not powerless in this moment. In fact, you are positioned at the most strategic point. The shock may be forming, but so is your opportunity to lead differently. Leadership in a family is not about authority titles. It is about emotional stability. It is about spiritual awareness. It is about being the one who refuses to let chaos dictate the outcome. There is weight in being chosen, but there is also honor. God trusted you enough to send the warning through your ears first. That trust speaks volumes. It means you are not spiritually asleep. It means your heart is tuned enough to receive correction before crisis. It means heaven sees your influence even if others overlook it. As we move forward, you will begin to see how your response in the next moments could determine whether the coming shock becomes a fracture or a foundation. And what you do next will matter more than you realize. There is something more dangerous than the coming shock itself. It is not the sudden news. It is not the exposure. It is not even the conflict that may rise. The most dangerous element in this entire moment is ignoring the warning. When God says, "A big shock is coming to your family," and follows it with urgency, open immediately before it's too late, He is revealing that timing is critical. Delay changes outcomes. Silence multiplies impact. Complacency strengthens what should have been confronted. Many families do not collapse in a single day. They weaken slowly. They drift quietly. They normalize dysfunction until it becomes culture. Small lies become acceptable. Small resentments become permanent. Small compromises become patterns. And because nothing dramatic happens immediately, everyone assumes it is safe to continue. But beneath the surface, pressure builds. And when pressure is ignored long enough, the eventual break feels catastrophic. Ignoring a warning does not cancel the event. It only removes preparation. If you dismiss this as exaggeration, you lose the advantage of readiness. If you convince yourself that everything is fine without examining the signs, you give the forming shock more room to grow. That is why denial is not neutral. It is costly. Pride is one of the strongest barriers to protection. Pride says, "My family would never face something like that." Pride says we are different. Pride says, we can handle it if something happens. But humility says, if there is even a small risk, I will prepare. Humility listens. Humility adjusts. Humility acts before proof becomes unavoidable. And humility preserves what pride often loses. Another danger of ignoring this warning is emotional escalation. If the shock arrives unexpectedly, reactions will likely be fueled by surprise and fear. Words spoken in shock often wound deeper than words spoken in preparation. When people are blindsided, they defend instead of reflect. They accuse instead of listen. They retreat instead of repair. Preparation creates emotional control. Ignorance creates emotional explosion. There is also a spiritual consequence to ignoring divine alerts. When God speaks and we repeatedly brush it aside, our sensitivity dulls. The next warning becomes harder to recognize. Discernment weakens. Over time, we stop hearing subtle nudges altogether. This is not because God stopped speaking. It is because repeated dismissal trains the heart to tune him out. And that is a dangerous place for any household. Consider how many people look back at a crisis and say, there were signs. They remember the tension. They remember the strange feeling. They remember the repeated argument or the secretive behavior. But they tell the story in hindsight. Regret often sounds like clarity that came too late. This warning is giving you clarity before regret has a chance to form. Ignoring this moment could also mean missing an opportunity for healing. Sometimes the shock is not meant to destroy but to expose something that has needed attention for years. If you ignore the early alert, the exposure may come in a harsher way. What could have been handled privately may become public. What could have been corrected gently may erupt forcefully. Preparation softens impact. There is a thin line between prevention and regret. That line is action. Even small actions now can shift major outcomes later. A sincere conversation today could prevent an explosive confrontation tomorrow. A decision to pray intentionally tonight could guard against confusion next week. A choice to check in with a struggling family member could stop isolation from turning into crisis. The danger of ignoring this warning is not just external. It is internal. It can harden your heart. It can create a mindset that assumes warnings are exaggerations. It can make you passive when vigilance is required. And passivity is often mistaken for peace. But true peace is active. It is maintained. It is guarded. It is protected intentionally. You may feel tempted to minimize what you are hearing. You say, this is probably not about us. But ask yourself honestly, what does it cost to prepare? Prayer costs time. Conversation costs humility. Reflection costs vulnerability. But ignoring the warning could cost unity, trust, or stability. When weighed carefully, preparation is always the wiser investment. This is not about living in fear. It is about living in awareness. Fear paralyzes. Awareness mobilizes. Fear imagines worst-case scenarios. Awareness strengthens weak areas before scenarios unfold. If you respond wisely now, the coming shock may lose its destructive power entirely. But if you dismiss this moment, you remove the shield that preparation provides. You are standing at a pivotal point. You have been alerted before impact. That alone is a gift. But a gift unused loses its value. A warning unheard loses its purpose. The danger is not the shaking itself. The danger is being unready when it arrives. And what you choose to do next will determine whether this warning becomes your family's protection or your family's missed opportunity. Now that you understand the weight of this warning, the question becomes clear. What must you do right now? Not tomorrow. Not when the signs become louder. Not when the shock is already unfolding. If God says a big shock is coming to your family and urges you to listen carefully, then action is required immediately. Preparation is not passive. It is intentional, focused, and sometimes uncomfortable. The first action you must take is to pray strategically, not casually. Casual prayer is routine. Strategic prayer is targeted. It addresses specific vulnerabilities. It calls out areas of tension by name. It invites clarity where confusion has been building. Instead of vague words spoken quickly, take time to sit in stillness and ask directly, where is the weak point in my family right now? Listen quietly. You may sense a name, a situation, or a pattern that needs attention. Do not ignore what surfaces. Next, examine the spiritual atmosphere in your home. Atmosphere shapes behavior more than people realize. If the environment has been filled with constant stress, harsh words, negative media, or emotional coldness, it must shift. Ways do not happen automatically, it is cultivated. Play worship music softly in the background. Speak kindly, even when others are tense. Remove influences that stir agitation instead of calm. Small adjustments in atmosphere can soften hardened hearts. You must also guard your words carefully in the coming days. Words can either escalate or stabilize a situation. When tension rises, the temptation is to respond quickly and emotionally. But restraint is powerful. Choose responses instead of reactions. Lower your tone instead of raising it. Ask questions instead of making accusations. If a shock begins to unfold, your calm presence may be the difference between resolution and rupture. Another immediate action is to initiate gentle conversations where distance has grown. Do not wait for a dramatic moment to force communication. Approach family members individually if needed. Ask simple but sincere questions. Are you okay? Is there something you've been carrying alone? Have we been drifting in any area? These questions open doors without creating defensiveness. Sometimes the shock is prevented simply because someone finally feels safe enough to speak honestly. If you sense secrecy or hidden struggle, do not confront with suspicion. Confront with compassion. People hide when they feel unsafe. They reveal when they feel understood. If someone in your household is battling something privately, your calm approach could prevent that struggle from exploding publicly later. It may also be necessary to establish boundaries that were long overdue. Boundaries are not punishments. They are protection. If certain habits, relationships, or patterns have been quietly damaging your family dynamic, now is the time to address them. Delay only strengthens unhealthy cycles. Boundaries set calmly and clearly create safety, not division. You should also consider dedicating intentional time, whether through fasting, reflection, or extended prayer, to seek clarity. This is not about ritual, it is about focus. When distractions are reduced, discernment sharpens. You may gain insight into something you had previously overlooked. The shock that seemed mysterious may suddenly make sense as you see the underlying cause forming. Another powerful step is to speak protection over your family daily. Even if others are unaware of the coming tension, your declarations matter. Speak unity. Speak stability. Speak wisdom. Your words carry influence in the spiritual and emotional atmosphere of your home. When spoken consistently, they shape expectation and mindset. At the same time, prepare your own heart. If the shock involves exposure or correction, you must be ready to respond without pride. If a mistake is revealed, focus on restoration instead of blame. If conflict surfaces, prioritize understanding over being right. Emotional maturity will be your greatest strength. You must also pay attention to timing. If you feel strongly prompted to address something specific, do not procrastinate. There are moments when courage is required immediately. Waiting for a better time can cause that window to close. Courage now may prevent regret later. And finally, refuse to panic. Panic clouds the judgment. It magnifies fear. It spreads instability. Preparation should bring clarity, not anxiety. You have been warned because you are loved. You have been alerted because there is still room to act. That means the situation is not beyond influence. The coming shock may test your family, but preparation transforms tests into strengthening moments. If you act with wisdom, humility, and intentionality, the impact can be softened or even redirected entirely. What you do in these next days matters more than you realize. And what comes next will reveal how protection is still within reach, even now. Right now, you may feel the weight of everything that has been spoken. The warning is serious. The signs are real. The responsibility is clear. But hear this with strength in your spirit. Protection is still available. The fact that this message reached you before the full impact of the shock means the door is not closed. The window of mercy is still open. And what happens next can still be shaped by your response. When God gives a final warning, it is not an announcement of defeat. It is an invitation to intervene. There is a turning point hidden inside this moment. A line in the sand where the direction can shift. The shock may be forming, but it does not yet have the final word. Heaven does. Protection does not always mean preventing every uncomfortable event. Sometimes protection means limiting damage. Sometimes it means exposing something early so it does not grow deeper roots. Sometimes it means strengthening hearts before tension rises. If you act now with wisdom and humility, what was meant to destabilize your family can instead awaken it. You must understand something powerful. Mercy often operates quietly before justice becomes loud. The warning you received is mercy moving ahead of impact. It is grace stepping in before consequences escalate. Many people do not receive warnings this clear. Many families are blindsided without preparation. But you were alerted. That alone is evidence that heaven is invested in your household. This is the turning point. You can choose fear or you can choose focus. You can choose panic or you can choose preparation. You can choose denial or you can choose discernment. The shock does not define the outcome. Your response does. There is still time to pray intentionally over each family member by name. There is still time to repair strained communication. There is still time to remove influences that have quietly weakened unity. There is still time to strengthen weak foundations. When a builder sees cracks early, reinforcement prevents collapse. And you have seen the cracks. If the coming shock involves exposure, then ask for truth to surface gently instead of explosively. If it involves conflict, ask for calm clarity instead of emotional chaos. If it involves financial strain, Ask for wisdom and discipline before desperation sets in. You are not powerless. You are positioned. Sometimes the greatest turning point is internal. When you shift your mindset from fear to authority, everything changes. Instead of waiting helplessly, you begin covering your household intentionally. Instead of assuming the worst, you prepare for stability. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond strategically. You may feel like you are standing on the edge of something unknown, but the unknown does not equal defeat. It simply means you must walk carefully, and careful steps can redirect dangerous paths. There is also something else happening beneath the surface. When you choose to act in faith rather than fear, you send a signal into the spiritual atmosphere of your home. You establish that unity matters. You establish that division will not be welcomed. You establish that correction will be embraced instead of resisted. That stance alone weakens the power of whatever shock is forming. You not underestimate the power of one steady person in a tense environment. One calm voice can silence rising chaos. One humble apology can dissolve years of distance. One intentional prayer can bring clarity into confusion. This is why protection is still available, because influence is still in your hands. And here is something deeply important. The shock may not unfold the way you imagined. Sometimes the anticipation feels heavier than the actual event. Sometimes the preparation prevents the worst-case scenario entirely. But if you ignore this moment, you remove that possibility. The turning point is now. You'll be glad you stayed for what's about to unfold next, because the next revelation will show you how strength rises even after shaking begins. Type divine protection surrounds my family in the comments if you receive this. Lesson code 842 is now activated. As this turning point stands before you, understand that every message like this is a spark of light pushing back darkness in homes around the world. When you release a super thanks, join as a member, or so through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on your screen, you are planting seeds into fertile spiritual ground. The word declares that as you sow beside many waters, your harvest will not fail, and today those waters are families crying out for warning and restoration. I feel this strongly. I am inviting you to act not as a viewer, but as a builder of protection for countless households. Do not let this holy urgency pass you by. Your giving becomes oil that keeps this lamp burning. As you step forward, may divine covering multiply over your own home. Move now in faith and seal this moment with obedience. Now that you understand the warning, the signs, the responsibility, and the turning point, there is something you must firmly establish within yourself: your spiritual authority. When God says a big shock is coming to your family and gives you time to prepare, He is not only alerting you, He is empowering you. Authority is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is not controlling. True spiritual authority is calm, steady, and deeply rooted in conviction. Many people underestimate the influence they carry inside their own homes. They assume leadership belongs to the loudest voice or the oldest member, or the one who earns the most. But spiritual authority operates differently. It flows through the one who is spiritually awake. It rests on the one who chooses wisdom over pride, patience over reaction, and prayer over assumption. And right now, that person may be you. Strengthening your authority begins internally. You cannot stabilize others if you are unstable within yourself. Take inventory of your emotions. Are you operating from fear? From anxiety? From resentment? If so, address those first. Authority built on fear collapses under pressure. Authority built on peace endures shaking. Before confronting any external issue, confront your internal atmosphere. Next, Establish consistency in your spiritual habits. Authority weakens when discipline disappears. Even small daily acts, intentional prayer, moments of reflection, speaking positive declarations, reinforce your foundation. You are preparing not only for a potential shock but for leadership during it. Leadership requires stamina. When tension arises in the household, your tone will matter more than your volume. Speak clearly but gently. When others become emotional, do not mirror their intensity. Mirror steadiness instead. Emotional maturity diffuses chaos. If accusations surface, respond with clarity rather than defensiveness. If confusion spreads, provide direction instead of panic. Authority is demonstrated most clearly during instability. You must also guard unity intentionally. Division often begins subtly, with sarcasm, dismissive comments, or unresolved irritation. If you notice fractures forming between family members, address them early. Encourage conversation before resentment grows roots. Sometimes simply saying, "Let's talk about this calmly," can redirect an escalating moment. Silence allows division to deepen. Courageous conversation prevents it. Teach discernment by example. You do not need dramatic speeches. Model attentiveness. Show your family what it looks like to pause before reacting. Let them see you choosing wisdom when frustration tempts you. Influence multiplies through observation. In moments of private prayer, speak protection over your household with confidence, not hesitation. Authority is expressed through certainty. Declare peace in your home. Declare clarity in decisions. Declare exposure of hidden issues before they can cause destruction. Your words shape expectation. When spoken consistently, they reinforce stability. However, strengthening authority does not mean becoming rigid. Flexibility is essential. If correction is needed, be open to it. If you discover that you contributed to tension in some way, admit it quickly. Nothing strengthens leadership more than humility. When you own mistakes, you create an environment where others feel safe doing the same. You may encounter resistance. Not everyone appreciates being reminded of deeper issues. Some may prefer denial because it feels easier. Do not respond to resistance with force. Respond with patience. Authority does not require validation from others to remain steady. Remember, the coming shock, if it unfolds, will test not only relationships but also composure. People will look for stability. They will look for someone who is not overwhelmed. If you prepare now, you will be ready to provide that anchor. And do not isolate yourself emotionally in this process. Authority does not mean carrying everything silently. Seek wisdom if needed. Seek counsel if necessary. Strength includes knowing when to ask for guidance. If this message is strengthening you, take a moment to align outwardly as well. Like this video as a declaration that you are stepping into spiritual authority for your household. Share it with someone who needs encouragement to lead with wisdom instead of fear. Comment below, "I stand as watchman over my family." And make sure you are subscribed so you never miss the guidance meant to guard your home in critical moments. Your engagement spreads this protective word to families who may be unaware that preparation is still possible. Authority is not about control. It is about influence guided by love. It is about steadiness during storms. It is about being spiritually awake when others are distracted. And when the shaking begins, if it begins, you will not crumble. You will stand. What comes next will reveal a truth. The enemy never wanted you to understand about this coming shock. There is something critical you must understand about the coming shock. There is a perspective the enemy never wants you to discover. When God says a big shock is coming to your family, The surface meaning feels threatening. It feels unstable. It feels like something designed to scatter what you have built. But here is the deeper truth. The enemy relies on confusion, panic, and misinterpretation. What he never wants you to realize is that a shock can strengthen what it was sent to break. The enemy's strategy is simple. Surprise creates fear. Fear creates reaction. Reaction creates damage. And damage creates division. Division is the ultimate goal. Because a divided family weakens itself from the inside. Communication stops. Trust erodes. Distance grows. And once unity fractures, everything else becomes harder to repair. But what if the shock does not produce panic? What if it produces clarity instead? What if exposure becomes healing? What if confrontation becomes restoration? What if tension becomes transformation? This is the outcome the enemy never anticipates, because it requires maturity, humility, and spiritual awareness. And that is exactly what you are building right now. If the coming shock involves exposure of something hidden, remember this: hidden problems grow in darkness. When light touches them, healing becomes possible. Yes, exposure may feel uncomfortable. It may disrupt routines. It may challenge perceptions. But secrecy is far more destructive than revelation. A wound cannot be treated if it remains covered. The enemy depends on silence. He depends on the phrase, "Let's just not talk about it." But healing begins when truth surfaces. If the shock involves conflict, remember that conflict is not always collapse. Sometimes conflict reveals what hath been avoided for too long. If handled with wisdom, it becomes a reset point. Long-standing misunderstandings can finally be addressed. Old hurts can finally be acknowledged. And buried resentment can finally be released. The enemy wants you to believe conflict equals ending. But often, conflict equals beginning, if handled correctly. Here is also the possibility that the shock will reveal weakness in structure. Financial strain, emotional instability, unhealthy habits. These may come to light. The enemy hopes that revelation will bring shame. Shame leads to hiding. Hiding leads to isolation. Isolation leads to fragmentation. But if you reject shame and choose responsibility instead, the outcome shifts. Weak areas can be reinforced. Habits can be corrected. Patterns can be interrupted. Panic is the enemy's greatest amplifier. The moment people panic, clarity disappears. Words become weapons. Assumptions become facts. Emotions override reason. That is why you must guard your composure fiercely. Calmness in crisis is not denial. It is strategy. When others escalate, your steadiness becomes a shield. When others accuse, your patience becomes a stabilizer. There is something else the enemy does not want you to see. Sometimes the shock was intended to scatter your family, but it can unite you instead. Shared crisis often reveals shared love. When faced together, challenges create bonding that comfort never could. Families who survive storms often emerge stronger than before, because they were forced to communicate honestly and depend on one another. The enemy also underestimates repentance. If someone in your household has made a mistake, the enemy expects pride to block reconciliation. But humility breaks his strategy. A sincere apology dismantles months of tension. A willing heart disrupts cycles of blame. Restoration becomes possible where destruction seemed inevitable. Another hidden truth is this: sometimes the anticipation of the shock is heavier than the shock itself. Fear magnifies what has not yet happened. But once faced calmly, the situation may prove smaller than imagined. Revelation lives in the name. Awareness reduces chaos. Authority limits damage. Do not forget that the warning came from God, not from the enemy. That alone changes everything. The enemy brings chaos without clarity. God brings warning with opportunity. The enemy strikes in silence. God alerts in advance. The enemy aims to scatter. God aims to strengthen. You are not entering this season blind. You are not entering it unarmed. You are not entering it unprepared. You have insight. You have awareness. You have time. And time, used wisely, shifts outcomes. What the enemy does not want you to know is that the very shock he hoped would weaken your family could become the catalyst that solidifies it. What was meant to divide could deepen trust. What was meant to expose weakness could build resilience. What was meant to create distance could spark reconnection. The narrative is not fixed. The ending is not written by fear. It is shaped by response. And because you have chosen awareness over denial, calm over panic, and preparation over passivity, the coming shock does not hold ultimate power. The next part will reveal what happens after the shaking, and how restoration becomes stronger than what existed before. No matter how intense the shock may feel when it arrives, it will not last forever. Shaking has a moment. Restoration has a process. And if you respond with wisdom, what comes after the shock can be stronger than what existed before it. This is the part many people fail to see while they are in the middle of disruption. They assume that once something breaks, it can never be fully repaired. But that assumption is not always true. In fact, some foundations are only strengthened after they have been tested. After the shock, emotions will likely be raw. There may be silence. There may be tears. There may be difficult conversations that no one wanted to have. But this is where the restoration plan begins, not in avoidance, but in acknowledgement. The first step is honesty. Honest recognition of what happened. Honest admission of what was ignored. Honest ownership of individual contributions to the situation. Restoration cannot grow where denial still lives. If exposure was part of the shock, resist the urge to cover it quickly just to restore comfort. Comfort without correction is temporary. Instead, take time to examine the root. Ask deeper questions. How did this begin? What allowed it to continue? What patterns made it possible? These questions are not meant to accuse, but to understand. Understanding prevents repetition. Forgiveness will also become essential. Without forgiveness, the shock will leave permanent cracks. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring the damage. It means choosing not to let the damage define the future. When someone admits fault sincerely, meet that humility with grace. When trust has been shaken, rebuild it slowly, consistently, intentionally. Trust restored too quickly without accountability is fragile. Trust rebuilt through patience becomes stronger. Communication after the shock must become more intentional than before. If your family previously avoided hard topics, that pattern must change. Schedule conversations if necessary. Create safe spaces where each person can speak without interruption. Listen fully before responding. Many families discover after a crisis that they had been speaking at each other for years but never truly listening. If financial strain was part of the disruption, create a clear and transparent plan moving forward. Transparency reduces suspicion. If emotional wounds were exposed, consider seeking wise counsel or mentorship if needed. Restoration does not mean handling everything alone. Sometimes strength includes inviting guidance into the process. One of the most powerful elements of restoration is unity of purpose. After surviving a shock, gather your family and define what you want your home to represent moving forward. Peace, honesty, accountability, support. Make those values visible. Speak them aloud. Write them down if necessary. When everyone understands the vision, rebuilding becomes collaborative instead of isolated. There may also be grief involved. Grief over broken trust. Grief over lost time. Grief over words spoken in anger. Allow space for that grief. Healing cannot be rushed, but do not allow grief to settle into bitterness. Bitterness freezes progress. Healing requires forward movement. You will notice something surprising if restoration is handled correctly. The bond between family members may deepen. Vulnerability often creates connection. When people see each other's weaknesses and choose compassion instead of rejection, respect grows. Shared struggle builds empathy. Surviving something difficult together can produce resilience that comfort never could. It is also important to celebrate progress, even small steps. If communication improves slightly, acknowledge it. If patience increases, recognize it. If unity feels stronger, affirm it. Positive reinforcement strengthens new patterns. Restoration thrives on encouragement. Spiritually, the season after the shock can become transformative. Prayer may become more sincere. Gratitude may increase. Awareness may sharpen. The experience that once felt threatening can become a testimony. You may one day look back and say, "That moment changed us, but it changed us for the better." Do not forget, the shock did not come without warning. That means you were positioned to handle it. And because you were positioned, you have the capacity to rebuild wisely. What might have destroyed another household can refine yours. Restoration is not automatic. It requires participation. It requires humility. It requires consistency. But it is absolutely possible. The shaking does not mean the end of your family's strength. It can mark the beginning of a stronger chapter. And now, as we move toward the final message, everything will come together with assurance, covering, and a declaration over your home that will seal what has been spoken. You have walked through this message step by step. You have faced the warning. You have examined the signs. You have accepted the responsibility. You have prepared your heart. And now, as we come to the final part, hear this clearly. This message was never meant to leave you in fear. It was meant to position you in protection. When God says, "A big shock is coming to your family," and urges you to listen carefully before it is too late, it is not a sentence of doom. It is a shield extended in advance. It is love moving ahead of disruption. It is mercy speaking before consequences grow heavier. And because you listened, because you did not ignore it, you have already shifted something in the spiritual atmosphere of your home. The warning was serious, yes, but so is the covering over your household. There may still be moments ahead that test your composure. There may be conversations that feel uncomfortable. There may be revelations that require humility. But none of it will catch you unprepared. You are no longer walking blindly. You are alert. You are steady. You are positioned as a guardian of peace within your family. Understand this deeply. God does not expose what He does not intend to heal. He does not shake what He plans to abandon. If something surfaces, it is because restoration is available. If something is corrected, it is because growth is possible. The shaking is never the final chapter. Refinement is. Right now, I declare calm over your household. I declare clarity where there was confusion. I declare unity where there was subtle division. I declare wisdom in every conversation that is about to happen. Let peace settle into your rooms. Let humility soften hardened places. Let love override pride. Whatever shock attempts to rise, it will not destroy your family. It will not scatter what God intends to keep together. It will not define your future, because preparation has already begun. Awareness has already shifted the atmosphere, and authority has already been established. You were warned because you were valued. You were alerted because you were trusted, and you responded because you are spiritually awake. Do not carry anxiety from this message. Carry confidence. Confidence that you are covered. Confidence that your actions matter. Confidence that divine intervention moves ahead of visible events. The enemy may attempt disruption, but he does not have ultimate control over your household. Response determines outcome, and you have chosen wisdom. In the days ahead, walk gently but boldly. Speak thoughtfully. Pray intentionally. Lead calmly. If tension tries to rise, remember everything you have learned here. If fear tries to whisper, answer it with truth. If conflict tries to escalate, respond with steadiness. You are not powerless. You are positioned. And even if the shock unfolds in a way you did not expect, it will not break what is meant to stand. It may bend pride. It may expose weakness. It may force honesty. But those things build strength when handled correctly. This message was protection, not punishment. It was a wake-up call, not a final blow. It was heaven saying, I care enough to tell you before it happens. So now I seal this with assurance. Your family is not abandoned. Your home is not forgotten. Your prayers are not unheard. Protection surrounds you even now. Type "My family is covered" in the comments if you receive this promise. Blessing code 911 is now activated. As this message closes and divine covering settles over your household, I need you to understand something sacred. Every warning, every word of protection released here is a seed of light pushing back darkness in families you may never meet. When you release a super thanks, step into membership, or sow through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code appearing on your screen, you are not supporting a channel. You are fueling a mission that rescues homes before it is too late. The word declares that when you sow into good ground, your harvest will overflow. And today that ground is the hearts of families crying out for guidance. I feel compelled to say this plainly. I am inviting you to stand with this mission as a guardian of households beyond your own. Do not delay this holy response. As you give, may protection multiply over your family, may provision chase you down, and may peace reign within your walls. Step forward now and seal this moment with action.